who told you to do that? I didn't tell you to do that. And then the slave was like, your uncle? Who said you have to listen to didn't I tell you have to do this first? And the problem is, the nephew is like that, but the uncle is also exactly like that. So the slave is we'll get to the slave, but right now we're talking about the master. The master is naturally always upset that the slave is never doing enough. That was number one. And number two, he's also upset when the slave is doing even one thing for any other master, even though he's not an exclusive slave. He's got multiple authorities to answer to, and he has to keep answering to them. And as a result of that, the master keeps changing the rules. The master sees that you're serving the other one at 10 a.m., he's like, I need you here at 10 a.m. every morning from now on. All of a sudden, the rule changed. Why? Because I noticed that he's serving somebody else at 10 a.m. I need to change the game a little. And the other one's going to change the rules on you. And the other one. So the slave is constantly having to keep up with a new evolving schedule and expectations. There's never any standard. Then let's take it even further. We're talking about each one of them now. Dayiq means he's always upset. He's always tight-chested. When someone has anxiety, like you do about 15 minutes before iftar, your personality, you're not the nicest person. That's why this is the time to make dua and not talk to people. Part of the wisdom, this is not a good time for you to really talk to people. Right? Just talk to Allah at that time. Okay? Leave people alone. Allah saved humanity from you by making that a time of dhikr also. Right? But anyway, but if you have anxiety and you're stressed out about something, are you an easy person to be around? No. And if you have a boss who looks like they're upset, and some offices have those glass walls, and you could see your boss and he's got a face, and you got to walk in there, you're like, can I be doing anything else right now than walking in there? Some of you have that when you see your mom or your dad or your professor or your boss, or you're about to you see the look already. You're like, this is not gonna go well. This is not gonna. But that's their constant state, and you're just wondering what are they upset about next, right? That's dayiq. Then there's bakhil. Bakhil means that they're always accusing you of not doing enough, of wasting their money, of not saving you enough, of not being efficient enough, of not being productive enough, because a bakhil wants to keep hoarding more and more and more, and the only reason they have you is to be able to hoard more, and you're an unnecessary, unfortunate expense for them. Your entire existence is just an expense for them, a necessary evil. They don't like you, they need you. But they don't have to like you for it, right? And they let you know that. They'll let you know, I don't even know why I have this kind of useless help all the time. They don't even get anything done. And there's constant comments about how useless you are, how worthless you are, how you should have bought the other one. He only had one broken tooth, should have had that slave. Constant comments about the slave and how useless they are, because your bukhl is never filled. Your greed and your miserliness is never satisfied. Then of course there's su'ul akhlaq. And su'ul akhlaq is actually just straightforward. This I didn't really understand until I studied in the university, capitalism. Because in capitalism we study something, and Max Weber talked about this, other sociologists talked about this. But there's one of the conflicts that has always existed in the history of the world is capital versus labor, right? So there's the people with the money and the people who need to do the work to earn the money, right? So there's the boss and the employee. Make it simple: master, slave, boss, employee, whatever you want to call it. But what does the boss want? The boss wants to get the most work out of you and pay you the most or the least. The boss wants to pay you the least and get the most work. The boss wants the most hours and the least vacations. The boss wants to squeeze every ounce of work out of you. Why? Because your labor translates into profit for him. That's why. You are nothing more than a cow or a sheep or a tool, or a vehicle or an engine. That's all you are. You're just a machine that is to be, unfortunately you have to put fuel in the engine for the engine to run, and fuel costs money. So I'm going to pay you, but doesn't mean I like paying you. So I'm going to get the cheapest possible labor I can for the most labor that I possibly can. That is the entire agenda of capital. Labor has a different problem. Labor says, no, 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 we have rights. We're going to form a union. We're going to fight against capital. We need better salaries, more time off, more luxury, more, lesser working hours, etc., etc., etc. The labor wants to do the least amount of work for the most amount of money. And capital wants the most amount of work for the least amount of money. So there's constant clash between capital and labor through the entire history of the world. And usually capital has power, and it squeezes labor and squeezes labor and squeezes labor until labor says, you know what, we've had enough, burn the system down. And then there's an entire revolution, and the castles are burnt down, and there's like riots in a Walmart and whatever. Right? And you might, if those of you that are addicted to TikTok are hearing about the revolution that's coming, because we're done with these corporations sucking our blood. But that's history. This has happened generation after generation, century after century, in society after society around the world. Remember the spider analogy? Enough spiders, and eventually the bugs say, you know what, it's time that we ate the spider. That's what happens eventually, right? But anyway, because of that, because capital or the masters, they don't see you as human, they see you as a necessary expense. They dehumanize you. So they speak to you in a way and they treat you in a way that a human being should not be treated. And when someone treats someone less than dignified, one of the words for that is mutashakis. Lahu su'ul akhlaq. So it completely makes sense given their ultimate agenda. If that's your ultimate agenda, that's how you're going to treat people, right? That's from the perspective of the master and how they see you. Now let's look at the same word mutashakis and see how, this is number 2 now, what does the slave feel when that happens? What's from the perspective of the labor, from the perspective of the servant? Number 1, the servant realizes it is impossible to please multiple bosses at the same time. There's no way I can make all of these people happy simultaneously. There's just no way. What's even more interesting is, generally, it's impossible to please multiple bosses or keep them content. But if each one of them, thank you so much. You know how I knew you were coming? Everybody was looking at you. Okay, so what was I saying? Something about bosses, right? Okay, yeah. Alhamdulillah. Somebody was watching the video and said, I gasped because Ustad drank water during Ramadan. Different time zones, yaar. Just because you're in Pakistan doesn't mean I have to fast with you right now. Anyway. So, you have if multiple bosses were all nice, it would still be impossible to please them, because there's always going to be a conflict of interest. But each one of them, forget each one of them being nice, or some of them being nice, each one of them is mutashakis. So they're already terrible human beings to begin with. On top of that, you're in an impossible situation where you have to please all of them. What does that do for an employee or a servant who's in that role? Constant fear, constant anxiety, constant negativity. Isn't it? How many students here, how many people here remember being in school and you had a teacher who had an anger problem? Okay, or you had a teacher who had like a really mean personality. Do you know that when a teacher walks into the classroom with a certain aura, with a certain energy, a certain personality, that has an immediate effect on the entire room? It's not just, they don't just walk in with their sound and their teaching. They walk in with their mood, and that becomes the mood of everyone else. Some people come to me sometimes, young guys come to me, Ustad, I know you're a YouTuber. I'm a YouTuber too. I was like, give me some tips about public speaking. I love those. They're so cute. And my number 1 tip, if you want to know, is your energy becomes everybody else's energy. The more relaxed you are, the more relaxed everybody else is going to be. The more angry you are, you're just instilling anxiety and fear or even anger into everybody else. Your negativity becomes their negativity. Your positivity becomes their positivity. You're nervous and uncomfortable and then they're getting uncomfortable sitting here watching you destroy yourself. Right? So it's just that simple. Relax, right? But what I'm saying is if you have multiple employers, all of them always upset, what impact does that have on you as the servant? You're always upset. You're always anxious. You're always high strung. You don't know where the next yelling is going to come from. You don't know where the next criticism is going to come from. The next beating is going to come from. The next punishment is going to come from. That's one problem. Then, you're always negotiating what is the least negative. Look, if I do this one thing, this boss will be a little less angry, but this boss will be 80% more angry, and that boss will become 300% more angry. So which beating do I want today? Because a beating's going to happen. I just need to negotiate the cost. There's no cost-benefit analysis. There's big cost and little cost analysis. Because there's no benefit. Nobody's going to be nice to me. So I'm just thinking about which one is the least capable of giving me the most harm, right? So which was the least harm I can suffer today? In other words, the harm is constant, and all I'm thinking about is the least harm. That's all I'm thinking about, right? Which means happiness, peace, being able to breathe, being able to just live, being able to just say, is not possible for me. It's not possible. The best case scenario is, oh, today's beating didn't bleed. Okay? So maybe it's just better to make the oldest master angry because when he hits, he's too old to hit too hard. Right? Because they can't really get up and that kind of negotiation. Imagine that's someone's life. Imagine that's someone's reality. How anxious and how negative and how depressing that reality is. What a prison that, even when they're not working and they're going to sleep, they're still calculating which punishment do I want to choose for tomorrow. So living, even when they're not working, they're still in a prison. They're still caged. That's the hellish state of that slave. Then, of course, I already mentioned there's no possibility of peace. If that is the case, in the end, what does that slave do? One, that slave decides that, or even if they keep trying to please and they can't do it, eventually they're going to collapse. Or they're going to rebel, right? Or they're going to become a trickster. So they're going to learn to lie and deceive so that they can get the most out of everyone while avoiding punishment, or put the blame on the other slave, or do something else, play games because they just know there's no winning this anyway, so might as well, everybody's getting theirs, I gotta get mine. So they become entirely interested in themselves. They become parasitical also because they're in this parasitic environment, right? That's the scenario. And Allah is using this as an example, not just to describe. Now, here's the interesting part as we switch to the other side. Allah is using this to describe people who believe in multiple gods. People who believe in multiple gods. And of course, the pagan Arabs, they believed in multiple gods. And this is the scenario when you have multiple gods to answer to. But the interesting thing is we don't have any historical record in the Quran, because the Quran is the primary historical record of pre-Islamic Arabia. We have sparse records. And inshallah, one day I'm planning on doing a course just on pre-Islamic literature, whatever is out there. Like pre-Islamic poetry, kalam al-saj'a, and the hikam, whatever, the wisdoms, the soothsayers, whatever soothsayer records we have, whatever there is that's accessible, to kind of get an idea what Arabia before Islam really looked like, right? But one thing we don't have is the demands of these gods. We don't really have that. But we do know one thing, and the Quran makes that very clear, as I've been trying to illustrate to you. So there are these gods. Each of these gods offers a different kind of benefit, right? Rain, fertility, victory in war, healing from sickness. Different gods offer different benefits. But not all the gods belong in one tribe. Some gods belong to different tribes. So if you're going to decide to worship one God, you didn't just join that God, you joined an affiliation with that tribe. You with me? So let's say you joined affiliation with the god of rain. Your village really needed rain, so you started paying homage to the rain god, and therefore you got affiliated with the tribe that has the rain god. But then your wife can't have a baby. You're like, I don't need rain. I need the god of babies. I need the fertility god, right? So you're switching gods now. When you're switching gods, that rain god, he's not going to rain on you because he's just a piece of wood. But behind him is a tribe and patrons. And you're no longer coming here and making your donation and making your contributions, and those contributions are now going to the fertility